They left the hunter to die in the rain. The downpour disguised everything. Blood, tears, even footsteps retreating through the mud. Malik's body lay twisted near the edge of the forest, his breathing ragged against the drumming sky. He hadn't fallen to a beast's claws or a wild predator's bite. No. He'd been brought down by men who once drank beside him, hunted beside him, called him brother. Their betrayal was a quiet, efficient thing, done with knives and silence. When they walked away, they didn't bother to look back. They believed the cold water would finish what they started long before morning light. But across the swollen river, in a small crooked cabin half swallowed by trees, a young woman named Asha sat listening to the storm and heard something different in the thunder. A low, human sound, a groan from the darkness outside. Instinct urged her to stay inside. Yet something deeper than instinct drew her out. The same pull that makes a flame reach upward even under rain. She grabbed her lantern and stepped into the storm. Her bare feet sank into wet earth as she pushed through the trees. When she found him, Malik looked more ghost than man. Skin gray, mud thick across his chest, eyes barely open. Still, his hand trembled when she touched him, the last small proof of life. Without knowing who he was or why he had fallen, Asha bent down, hooked her arms under his, and dragged his heavy body back through the rain. The effort tore at her muscles. By the time she reached her cabin, she was shaking, but she didn't stop until he lay near the hearth. She thought she was saving a stranger. She didn't realize she was reshaping her fate. The storm raged on long after she struck flint to spark the fire. Light flickered across the man's battered face, revealing blood still seeping from the wound hidden beneath his torn hunting leathers. His eyes moved beneath closed lids. Every shallow breath sounded like a battle. Asha knelt beside him, trying to understand whether he was waking or slipping further away. There was fear in her, yes, but also a calm born from something she could not name. The stubborn strength that rises only in those who have already survived their own darkness. She tore a strip from the hem of her skirt and wiped the muck from his chest. Her touch was light but steady. The man's stained lips moved. He murmured something rough and unintelligible. "Easy," she said softly, uncertainty ringing behind her words. "You're safe now." The fire crackled. Outside, rain kept striking the roof like a heartbeat that wouldn't quiet. Within those thin wooden walls, the two of them existed in a world separate from everything else. When his breathing faltered, panic surged through her. She ran to the door, filled a gourd with rainwater, hurried back and poured a trickle between his lips. "Don't die," she whispered fiercely. Not yet. She didn't know why she cared so much. She only knew there was a weight in the air around him. The kind that follows those who have already lost everything once before. As the night stretched on, the firelight grew steady, and she saw more of him. The sharp angles of a fighter, the marks of long, hard years. Near the threshold rested a broken bow, its string frayed. Around his belt were small talismans made of bone and feather. A hunter. Without knowing why, a name came to her like a whisper carried by the wind. Malik. She did not know how she knew it, but she was certain, and hearing it in her head sent a strange shiver through her. Nothing about this meeting felt like coincidence. The storm refused to break before dawn. Asha sat beside the fire, feeding it splinters of wood, listening to thunder roll through the mountains. Hours passed, slow and heavy. Malik's breath steadied. His chest rose and fell without the desperate hitch it had before. He was still unconscious but alive. Relief washed over her like warmth spreading from the hearth. Her grandmother's voice came back to her then, clear as if the old woman were seated beside her. "Those who help in the darkness are remembered by the light." The words wrapped around Asha's heart until they burned brighter than the flames. Suddenly the man coughed, his body jolting upright before falling back again. His eyes, dark as rain-soaked soil, opened at last. Where am I?" he rasped. "In a shelter," Asha answered. "I found you in the woods." He tried to sit up, snarling as pain seized his shoulder. "You shouldn't have touched me," he said through gritted teeth. "It's dangerous to be near me." "More dangerous," she replied evenly, "is letting someone die." The silence that followed sank deep. Malik turned his head, defeated not by muscle or wound, but by gratitude he didn't know how to show. Asha broke it by changing his bandages, careful not to meet his gaze. Outside, the storm softened until only dripping branches could be heard. Morning sunlight slipped through a crack in the roof and landed on Asha's face like a small, sacred blessing. Neither of them could have guessed that the line between rescuer and rescued had already blurred. A betrayal in the forest had birthed a crossing of souls. The hunter and the girl of the river woods now shared one shelter, one fragile fire, and without realizing it, one destiny. while the world beyond the trees resumed its endless rhythm. Something quiet and new began breathing inside that tiny cabin, tender and stubborn like a flame that insists on burning even beneath the rain. Asha didn't close her eyes at all that night. Every part of her body begged to rest, but her heart remained alert. Malik's fever had risen, his skin slick with sweat, his breath uneven. The smell of blood and damp earth lingered in the air like a warning. She recognized it immediately. Too many times she had seen strong men fall to wounds that seemed small at first, wounds that carried death hidden beneath the skin. She rummaged through baskets near the wall until she found what little remained of her herbs: nam leaves for cleansing, wild ginger for pain, the rough bark of black mangrove for fever. She remembered her grandmother's voice again. The medicine of the earth heals what the soul allows. She crushed the plants in a clay bowl until their scent filled the cabin, sharp and green. Lifting the cloth that covered the gash in his shoulder, she winced. The bleeding had stopped, but the flesh around it was hot and angry. She dipped a new cloth into the herbal pulp and pressed it carefully against the wound. Malik tensed, a groan escaping as his body jerked awake. "What are you doing?" he demanded hoarsely, trying to push her hand away. "Keeping you alive," Asha answered, not glancing up. Her voice carried no fear, only quiet authority, the voice of someone who had learned long ago that compassion is its own kind of strength. His glare softened into disbelief. He studied her for a moment. This slight woman bent over him, her face streaked with soot, her hair plastered to her forehead. How could someone so fragile face pain with unwavering calm? He wanted to ask her name, but another wave of fever dragged him under, pulling words from his tongue. Hours crept by. The fire had nearly died when she leaned forward and blew softly until it flared again, washing both of them in orange light. The sight of him, this proud stranger broken by betrayal, struck a chord she didn't expect. She thought of her own scars, the quiet kind life leaves behind when it takes away too much. Since sickness had claimed her parents, she had learned that survival was not luck. It was defiance. Perhaps, she thought, fate had brought her here so she could return one act of mercy once given to her long ago. When the fever rose, she cooled his skin with wet cloths and fanned the air with a wide banana leaf. When he shivered, she wrapped her thin blanket around his shoulders. Between those small motions she murmured half-formed prayers, not in words but in feelings, breathing hope into the room. The forest outside finally quieted. Dawn crept slow and silver through the cracks of the cabin. Light pooled across the floorboards, settling over them as softly as dew. Malik stirred again, eyes dull with exhaustion. "Why?" he whispered, voice so weak she almost didn't hear. "Why are you doing this?" Asha paused in her work, stared at the fading embers for a heartbeat, and said simply, "Because no one deserves to die alone." Her answer filled the space between them like a bell tone, clear, final, and unarguable. Malik turned his face upward, staring at the warped ceiling beams, and thought about everything he had lost. His honor, his companions, his misplaced pride. For years he'd convinced himself he needed no one. Now an unknown girl, barefoot and stubborn, was fighting to keep him tethered to life. Shame rose like smoke in his throat, but it was accompanied by something quieter, humility. Asha didn't notice. Her focus stayed on her patient. She changed the bandages carefully, wiped away what blood remained, and fed more twigs to the fire whenever it faltered. Time dissolved within those wooden walls. The outside world vanished. The cabin had become an island, a small pulsating heartbeat of existence hovering between death and dawn. Night came again, softer, almost kind. Malik slept deeply, the worst of the fever broken. Asha leaned her head against the rough timber behind her, eyes drifting upward to the slit of sky visible through the roof. The moon, round and unclouded, bathed the forest in silver. Crickets filled the emptiness left by the rain. For the first time in many hours, she exhaled slowly, let her shoulders drop, and whispered to the quiet world outside, a thought folded in gratitude. If he survives, may he know the value of an outstretched hand. The wind blew gently and the fire crackled in response. Malik's life still hung by a thread, but within that cabin, time had become sacred. The fight for survival was no longer his alone. It belonged to them both, and without realizing it, fate had begun to weave between them, a bond the outside world would never understand. The next morning arrived with a strange silence. The wind had stopped, the birds had yet to sing, and the air felt heavy, as if time itself hesitated to move forward. Malik woke slowly, his body aching as if he had been crushed by a boulder. The cabin ceiling spun above him, and for a moment, he didn't know where he was. He tried to sit up, but pain in his shoulder made him groan aloud. That's when he saw her, a young woman sitting by the fire, her face lit by the faint flame, stirring something that boiled in a bowl. For a moment, Malik just watched her. He didn't recognize the place, nor her face. Everything in him screamed suspicion. In the jungle, getting caught off guard was the same as signing your own death sentence. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice. Usher turned slowly, surprised to see him awake. "My name is Usher," she replied simply. "I found you collapsed in the forest. You were wounded." Malik narrowed his eyes, trying to make sense of it. "And why you bring me here? Who sent you?" Asha raised her eyebrows, not offended. "No one sent me. I just couldn't leave you there." He let out a dry, skeptical laugh. "You don't find kind people like that in the forest. Girl, you're with them, aren't you?" He came to finish what they started. She took a deep breath, looked him in the eye, and answered, "If I wanted you dead, I would have left you out there." Her tone was plain but firm, sharp as a blade of truth. Malik felt silent. That look in her eye, steady, calm, and somehow full of compassion, dismantled whatever resistance he had left. He felt ashamed, though he didn't know how to say sorry. Asha went back to stirring the bowl, letting the silence fill the space between them. "Drink this," she said, handing him the hot liquid in a gourd. Malik hesitated, still weary. "It's medicine, not poison," she added, her tone unchanged. He drank slowly. The taste was bitter, but his body seemed to recognize the blend healing herbs. Fever leaves, bitter roots. The fever began to ease. Sunlight streamed through the leaky roof and fell across Asher's face, revealing the simplicity and strength of her features. Malik watched her in silence. There was no wealth, no vanity, just a quiet presence, almost ancestral. This woman he barely knew had pulled him from death and now cared for him without asking for anything. And yet suspicion still clung to him. "Why risk yourself for someone you don't even know?" he asked at last, "Because someone once did the same for me." Asha replied, her eyes never leaving the fire. Malik wanted to ask more, but felt it would be invasive. So he just watched. The day passed slowly. Malik tried to sit up, but his body still felt too heavy. Asha changed his bandages carefully without a word. Sometimes he pretended to be asleep just to hear her singing softly a melody so old it felt like a conversation with the soul. At times he almost believed that cabin wasn't just a shelter, but a place where time and fate met. When night fell, the sound of crickets filled the air and the fire glowed once more. Malik looked at Asha and said in a calmer tone, "I accused you without reason." She simply replied, "Fear does that to us, but fear also fades." Malik turned his face toward the fire and stared at it. Deep in thought inside, something began to shift. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel anger. He felt gratitude and a kind of shame that hurt more than his wound. He realized that this girl, so fragile in the world's eyes, had more courage than all the men who had betrayed him. Asha leaned back, exhausted, and closed her eyes. Malik kept watching her for a while until sleep overtook him. Outside, the wind began to blow again, gently like it was carrying away the last remnants of distrust between them. Inside the cabin, the fire still burned, a symbol of life, slowly reclaiming its place. The hunter and the girl was safe for now, but fate, silent and patient, was already preparing the next step of the trial that would forever bind their stories. The rain had finally stopped, and the scent of wet earth still lingered in the air like a recent memory. More alert and less feverish, Malik began to take in every detail of the shelter around him. The patched straw roof, the gourd hanging from the beams, the bundles of herbs drying on strings. Everything carried the touch of someone who lived in harmony with nature. Someone who turned little into sustenance and silence into company. Asha moved through the space with ease, as if that small world was simply an extension of her own body. Malik watched in silence as she changed his bandages. Her movements were steady, without hesitation, yet there was in them an old gentleness. When she noticed his gaze, she spoke without lifting her head. "I learned this from my grandmother. She used to say, 'The strongest remedy isn't in the leaves, but in the hands that prepare them.'" Still cautious, Malik tried to break the silence. "And where is your grandmother now?" Asha set the cloth aside, took a deep breath, and replied, "She passed 3 rainy seasons ago. The fever took her first, then my parents. I was left alone. Since then, I've taken care of what's left." Her voice held no bitterness, only the calm of someone who'd learned to carry pain until it became part of life. Malik lowered his eyes. He felt small in the presence of this woman who, despite everything, spoke with quiet strength and a faith that seemed older than time. She went in, "The forest is all I have. It's harsh but fair. If you respect it, it feeds you. If you defy it, it punishes you." Malik gave a faint, tired smile. "And you're never afraid." Living here alone, Asha raised her eyes to his, looking straight at him. "Fear comes and goes like the rain. But if you hope for the sun, you have to learn to walk through the storm. The silence that followed was thick with meaning. Malik understood then that this young woman wasn't just a forest healer, but a soul forged in solitude and loss. Every word she spoke seemed to carry the voice of many women he had met in distant villages. Women who bore the weight of the world without ever asking for applause. Asha stood and walked to Asmal's window where the sun streamed in through golden beams. She looked outside and murmured as if speaking to the wind. When the fever took my parents, I asked God to take me too. But he didn't. So I learned that if he leaves us here, it's because there's still something we're meant to do. Malik listened in silence. There was too much truth in her words to ignore. For a moment, the hunter remembered his own story. The years spent among men who only understood strength and pride. The hunts where victory was all that mattered. The days when he believed solitude was proof of bravery. Now here before a woman who lived with so little and yet radiated peace, he felt hollow. Asha turned back to him and noticed something different in Malik's eyes. There was less hardness now, more humanity. So she smiled a subtle, sincere smile. You should rest. The wound will heal, but it needs time. Everything does. Malik nodded and leaned back, letting his body relax. Before falling asleep, he asked, "And if I want to thank you for all this, what can I give you?" Usher replied without hesitation, "Nothing. The good we do is its own reward." That answer echoed in his mind until sleep came. Outside, the sun slowly set, painting the forest in shades of orange. A distant bird call marked the end of the day. Inside the cabin, life found its rhythm against simple.com, but full of meaning. Thought. And in that moment, Malik understood something he had never felt during his hunts or his fights for power. The value of a soul that even wounded still chooses to care. Asha wasn't just saving him from death. She was teaching him through gestures and silences what it truly meant to live. The days passed slowly, and Malik's wound began to heal. His body grew stronger, but his spirit still bore the shadow of what he had lived through. At times he would wake up drenched in sweat, reliving the ambush, seeing again the faces of the companions who had betrayed him. Asha watched him in silence, never asking questions. She'd learned that some pain doesn't need words, only time. That morning, the sky was covered in thick clouds. The wind came from the south, carrying a warning Asha recognized instantly. The forest felt restless. The birds flew in flocks, branches cracked without reason, and even the river rushed faster. She stepped to the doorway and stood still for a few seconds. Malik noticed the tension in her face. "What is it?" he asked. Asha answered softly, almost a whisper. "There are people in the woods." Malik tried to get up, but the pain still kept him from moving quickly. He reached for the old knife he kept nearby and stared at the entrance. Footsteps approached, heavy, muffled by the damp earth. Usher crossed the cabin, lifted a loose board in the floor, and revealed a hole covered with straw and dry leaves. "Get in," she said. Malik looked at her, surprised. "What is that, a trap?" "I used it when soldiers passed through here some time ago. No one will find you if you stay quiet." There was a moment of hesitation. Malik knew that if he were discovered, he would bring danger to her. "They could hurt you, Asha," he said in a low voice. She replied, "Better me than you. They want blood, not truth." Malik climbed down slowly, his body still weak, and she covered the entrance with leaves, spreading some dirt on top. Dot. The footsteps grew louder. When the men arrived, they banged on the door hard. Asha took a deep breath before opening it. 3 figures appeared in the dim daylight. Armed men, their faces hardened by years of hunting. The eldest spoke. "Girl, we're looking for a man, wounded, dangerous. Has he passed through here?" She met his gaze without flinching. "Haven't seen anyone. Just rain and fear." The man looked at her with suspicion. He entered without asking and searched the place. He kicked over baskets, shoved pots, pulled back blankets. Asha stood still, hands crossed in front of her body. Inside, her heart pounded like a drum, but her face remained calm. The hunter crouched beneath the floorboards could hear everything. The creak of boots, the sound of voices, the danger breathing above his head. After a few minutes, the man returned to the door. "If you hear anything, speak up. That man's a beast. He's already killed people." Asha looked him in the eyes and replied, "Then maybe he's already been punished. The forest doesn't forgive the blood spilled on her soil." He laughed, unsure whether it was a challenge or wisdom, and walked out without saying goodbye. The others followed, disappearing among the trees. Asha waited a moment before lifting the board. Malik climbed out slowly, covered in sweat and dust. "You could have died because of me," he said, unable to meet her eyes. "It wouldn't be the first time. I've risked my life for someone," she replied, wiping her hands with a cloth. "But I don't like repeating stories." Malik watched her in silence. In that moment, something inside him shifted. It wasn't just gratitude. It was respect. The kind of respect born when one realizes that courage doesn't always wear the face of a warrior, but of a woman. The day remained gray, and the wind returned to whistle through the cracks in the cabin. Asha went back to her tasks as if nothing had happened. Malik, however, felt different. The life she had saved now felt charged with a new purpose, one he didn't yet know how to name. That night, as the fire lit the shelter, Malik spoke softly. "If one day I can repay what you've done, I swear I will," Asha replied without looking at him. "Promises don't heal wounds, Malik, but keeping one might stop another from forming." Outside, the distant sound of thunder signaled more rain to come, and inside that lost cabin, two souls who had faced abandonment and pain were slowly discovering the quiet power of loyalty. The days that followed were calmer. The danger seemed to have faded with the footsteps of the pursuers, and the silence of the forest once again wrapped the cabin like a protective cloak. Malik could now walk with some steadiness, though his arms still ached. Asha watched his progress with a mix of satisfaction and caution. She knew the buddy could heal quickly, but wounds of pride took longer. One morning, sunlight streamed through a gap in the roof, illuminating the dust suspended in the air. Malik woke before Asha and looked around. He noticed the way she had arranged everything. Every dried leaf stored in its place, every bowl carefully cleaned. It was a simple kind of order, yet full of meaning. There was something sacred in the way she cared for small things, as if she saw in them a value he had never learned to see. When she woke, the fire was already lit, and the smell of porridge filled the cabin. Malik, with a shy smile, stirred the pot. "I thought I'd repay you somehow," he said. Asher looked at him slightly surprised and replied, "If you cook better than you heal, I might be impressed." He laughed, a genuine laugh he hadn't let out in a long time. They sat by the fire and ate in silence. Afterward, Malik watched as Asha prepared her herbs. She crushed the leaves with a pestle, blowing away the fine dust that rose into the air. "You learned all this by yourself?" he asked. "Most of it, yes, but the forest teaches the rest. It speaks if you know how to listen." Malik raised his eyebrows, intrigued. "And what has it told you about me?" Asha smiled faintly. "That there are men who hunt to live and others who hunt to forget. I haven't decided which one you are yet." The words struck him. Malik lowered his gaze and fell silent. He thought of the lives he had taken, the times when fury replaced reason. Asha noticed the weight settling over him, but said nothing more. She knew some truths need to rest before they can ripen in the heart. In the days that followed, Malik began helping with the chores. He chopped wood, fetched water, repaired the roof. Asha watched quietly, noticing how the man who once seemed hardened now moved with more care. At night, they sat side by side and exchanged old stories. He spoke of battles, she of harvests. He described ambushes. She recounted legends told by her grandmother. And between one tale and the next, the distance between them shrank without them noticing. One afternoon, Asha asked him to help gather roots near the river. The path was narrow and damp, covered in moss. Malik followed behind, watching how she moved with ease, as if the forest recognized her. At one point he slipped and fell. Asha rushed to help him, but he laughed at himself. "The earth got the better of me again," he said. She answered, smiling. "It's not a defeat if the ground teaches you how to stand." Those words stayed with him. In the days that followed, Malik began to see the world differently. He noticed the little things, the birdsong at dawn, the smell of rain before it fell, the way Usha treated even the ants that invaded the cabin. He began to understand that true strength wasn't in hunting or vengeance, but in the patience and faith that carry life through hard days. One night, while watching the fire, Malik spoke softly. "Usher, you've saved me more than once, not just from death, but from myself." She looked at him serious and replied, "No one saves anyone, Malik. We just show the way. It's the heart that chooses to walk it." The wind blew, making the fire dance. Malik said nothing, feeling those words cut deeper than any wound. For the first time, he felt peace that didn't come from strength, but from humility. And so, between healing herbs and silent moments, Malik began to truly heal. His body no longer acted as much, and the soul that once hid behind fear and anger slowly started to open. In the heart of the forest, the hunter was learning that the deepest lessons come from the simple hands of those who never stopped believing in goodness. The moon was high that night, and the fire in the center of the cabin burned gently, casting light on the clay walls and shadows that moved slowly. Malik was nearly fully healed. He walked with confidence, breathed without pain, and for the first time in a long while, slept peacefully. But something inside him still refused to rest. It was a restlessness born of gratitude and shame. Asha slept curled near the fire, covered with a simple cloth. Malik watched her in silence, her peaceful face lit by the flame. How many times had he, A hunter used to solitude, passed through villages and seen women like her, quiet, invisible, full of courage no one noticed. Now he understood the value of her gesture, and the thought that he might never repay what Asher had done for him hurt more than the spear that had brought him down. That night, the wind blew strong and a branch snapped outside. Malik stood, walked to the door, and looked out into the dark forest. The trees swayed under the moonlight, and the rustling leaves sounded like ancient whispers. If I walk out of here alive, he thought, I need to give her more than just a thank you. It was a promise that wasn't born of guilt, but of respect. In the morning, Asha woke to the smell of burning wood. Malik was already outside, chopping firewood, his body steady, his eyes calm. "What are you doing up so early?" she asked, still sleepy. "Paying what I owe," he replied, not stopping the axe. She smiled with the knowing air of someone who'd seen this before. "Hard debts aren't paid with firewood, Malik, but the fire thanks you." The silence between them that day was different, lighter, as if something unseen connected their presence. In the afternoon, as the sun set and cicadas began to sing, Malik walked over to her. "Asha, I want to say something," he began. She continued stirring herbs without looking up. "Say it." He took a deep breath. "If I leave here alive, you'll never have to fear the world again." Usha paused, looked at him, confused. "And what does that mean?" Malik lowered his head, searching for the right words. "It means I'll come back, that one day I'll do for you what you did for me and more." Asha gave a faint, almost sad smile. "I've heard many promises, Malik. Some made with the heart, others with fear. None came back to fulfill them." Hess stepped closer, serious. "Then let me be the first." Usher's gaze softened. "I don't expect anything, Malik. Those who help don't do it for a reward." He nodded, but inside the promise was already made on. It was sacred. In the days that followed, Malik began to open up more. He spoke of the group of hunters he once lived with, of lands taken by greed, and of the man who had betrayed him. Asha listened in silence without judgment. When he finished, she would simply say, "The harm the world causes, the forest returns in its own time." Malik held on to those words like someone holding on to prayers. One night, the moon rose huge above the trees, lighting the shelter. Malik sat beside her and said, "Usha, maybe I was born to fight, but now I understand not every battle is worth the blood it demands." She replied in a calm voice, "There are battles we win by learning to let go." The wind blew, carrying the scent of distant rain. Malik looked up at the sky and murmured as if to himself, "If I leave this place, I want to be a different man." Asha answered without lifting her head, "Then start now." That night etched itself into Malik like a seal. The sound of the wind in the leaves, the low crackle of the fire, Asha's steady and serene gaze. He didn't know when he would leave or if he would ever see her again. But something within him told him that moment would stay with him forever. And so beneath the forest's silence and the glow of the moon, the hunter who had once lived chasing broken promises made the first one that truly mattered. Not to the woman who saved him, but to the life she had given back, a promise that would follow him, even as the forest paths led him far away. The dawn came in silence, dressed in mist. The forest was still asleep when Malik rose. Asha breathed softly, curled up near the fire, now little more than embers. He watched her for a moment, her face lit by the last glow. There was a serenity in her that touched him deeply at peace, that he, a hunter accustomed to violence, had never known. And it was with that image etched in his soul that he knew what he had to do. Malik put on what was left of his dry clothes, adjusted the leather strap on his arm, and slung his bow over his back. The wound was nearly healed. No more fever, no more weakness, but something still ached inside, a kind of pain no herb could cure. He looked at Asha one last time as if trying to hold on to the scent, the gestures, and the silence of someone who had changed his fate. Before leaving, he picked up a piece of wood from the table. With the tip of his knife, he carved his initials, MK. He made a small hole, ran a fiber string through it, and turned it into a necklace. He placed it on the ground, near the fire beside the blanket she used on cold nights. He stood there for a few seconds, unsure if he was leaving out of gratitude or cowardice. Deep down, he knew that if he waited for morning, he might not have the courage to go. Outside, the forest was beginning to wake. The cricket song was fading, and the wind carried the damp scent of morning. Malik walked slowly, feeling the cold ground beneath his feet. Each step felt heavier than the last. The cabin faded behind him, but his heart remained there in that simple shelter where he had learned the true meaning of survival. When Ash woke, the fire had gone out. She called his name once. Then again silence. She stood and noticed his absence. His blanket was folded, his mat empty. For a moment, she thought he might have gone to fetch firewood, but something inside her already knew Malik was gone. Usher approached the hearth and saw the small necklace on the floor. The wood was smooth, freshly carved, the initials catching the pale morning light. She touched it with her fingers, still warm. "So that's what you wanted to say," she murmured, her voice trembling slightly. She sat in front of the cold fire and remained still. There was no anger, no surprise, only a quiet emptiness, the kind that comes when destiny fulfills what it was meant to fulfill. She remembered his words from the night before. "If I leave this place alive, you'll never need to fear the world again." She smiled a bittersweet smile. The world never stopped being dangerous. "Malik," she whispered. "But some promises protect better than walls." The days that followed were long. Asha returned to her usual routine, gathering herbs, preparing medicines, tending to the wounds of travelers passing through the forest. But every now and then, when the wind blew from the north and carried the distant sounds of hunting, she would stop and look toward the horizon. As if listening for a name in the forest's murmurs, Malik's necklace came to hang by the cabin door. She left it there, swaying in the wind, a reminder that some lives cross paths only long enough to awaken what once lay dormant. With every rainfall, the sound of droplets on the roof brought back the memory of the night she found him wounded, and how fate, for all its harshness, sometimes acts with tenderness. Time moved on, his wounds healed far away, and her solitude took on a new meaning. Asha continued living in the forest, but something inside her had changed. She was no longer the frightened girl who dragged a wounded man through the mud. She was now a woman who knew the value of the gesture that saves Evan when nothing is given in return. And so, amid rustling leaves and quiet afternoons, the cabin stood firm. The fire, though lit by other hands, still held the warmth of that night, and the necklace swaying at the door seemed to whisper to those who passed. There are meetings that time may separate, but destiny never forgets. The years passed like a river that flows without looking back. The forest aged a little, trees grew taller, and the wind at times carried new stories, but also old memories. Asha, now a grown woman, continued living in peace. Time had etched fine lines around her eyes and gifted her the serenity that only experience brings. She had become a respected healer and guide in the region. People came from far away in search of her remedies, her counsel, and her words. Words that seemed to carry that weight of ancient wisdom. The cabin that had once sheltered to strangers had become a refuge for the wounded travelers. Orphans and abandoned women found rest and nourishment within its walls. Asha never turned anyone away. When asked why she did it, she would simply smile and say, "Because once someone bled under the rain, and God sent me to help him." Since then, I've learned that helping is the purest form of giving thanks. The wooden necklace still hung by the door, worn by time but intact. Sometimes the wind would make it sway and Asha would pause to look at it, feeling the same ache she'd felt years ago. She never saw Malik again. During some winters, she heard rumors that a group of hunters had reclaimed the old mountain lands, and that the new leader was a just man. With sad eyes, she never asked more than she needed to. She believed that when destiny wished, it would bring the answers. One morning, under a pale sun, the sound of hooves echoed along the muddy path. The village used to the forests. Silence stirred. Children ran to the road, curious. From behind the hill, a small caravan appeared. Mounted men carrying sacks of provisions, tools, and fabric. At the center of the group rode a man dressed in fine leather, his gaze steady. When he reached the villages, he dismounted carefully and looked around as if searching for something long lost. Asher, watching from a distance, felt her heart race. The years had changed. The man. But she recognized the posture, the eyes, the quiet. It was Malik. The same Malik who'd once left the necklace by the fire and disappeared under the weight of his own promise. Now standing before her was a different Mana, scarred, but with the calm light of someone who had learned the value of time. He approached slowly, and the people parted to let him through. When he stopped in front of her, he removed his hood and was silent for a moment. The wind rose, lifting the dust, and even the leaves seemed to hush. Malik Nelton, unexpected gesturant, said in a firm but trembling voice, "This woman saved me when everyone else left me to die. I've come back to fulfill what I promised." Asha remained still surprised yet serene. Malik continued, "With what was left of my life, I built new lands and new homes, but I realized there is no greater wealth than gratitude. So I bring this gift not to repay, but to multiply the good I once received." He gave a signal, and the men began to unload the horses' sacks of flour, fabrics, tools, and baskets of seeds. The villagers looked on in awe. Malik pointed to a plot of land near the cabin and said, "Here we'll build a shelter. A home for orphans and women alone, a place where no one will need to fear the rain or abandonment. And this shelter will have a name, Shelter from the Rain." His words echoed like a blessing. Asha lowered her eyes, moved. Silence broke only with the sound of wind in the trees. Malik lifted his gaze and looked at her with tenderness. It took me years to understand. Usher, true strength isn't of the body, but of the heart that never tires of loving. She stepped forward, placed a hand on his shoulder, and answered, "Promises born from pain are the only ones that survive time." He smiled, and in that smile there was peace. The people began to applaud, and the sound spread like birdsong. Children ran among the men laughing, and Usher, without meaning to let a tear fall. Malik, head held high, looked to Thesky, as if thanking fate for letting him fulfill his vow. From that day on, the village was never the same. The shelter was built by the hands of the people, and the heart of someone who had learned that life returns good in its own time. And Usher, though never seeking glory, became a symbol of something greater. The living reminder that no act of love is ever lost, not even under the longest rain. The sun rose behind the hills, gilding the thatched rooftops, and the curious faces gathered before the newly built structure. The shelter from the rain was complete. Its walls made of clay and wood carried the scent of hope. The damp courtyard reflected the shine of the previous night's raindrops, and the voices of women and children filled the air with life. It was the first dawn of that place, born from a promise made under the weight of pain. Malik stood before the crowd. The same man who had once been left for dead now stood tall, a symbol of transformation. He wore simple clothes, far from the hunter's garb and armor that once defined him. He looked lighter, though his eyes still held the gravity of someone who knew the wounds of fate. Beside him, Asha watched with calmness. The years had given her a quiet beauty, not the beauty of youth. But the kind time grants two souls shaped by courage and compassion. The people gathered closer as Malik raised his voice. "Many of you know my story," he began. "I bled on this land, and I rose again because of a woman who owed me nothing. She saved me when even God seemed distant. And it was she who taught me what true strength is." He turned to Asher, who watched him silently, and continued, "Strength is not about control. It is about support. It's not about wounding, but healing. That is what I learned from youth. The woman destiny used to bring me back to life." There were murmurs among the people, some with tears in their eyes. Malik knelt, a gesture of humility that silenced the air. "This woman," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "taught me more than any master ever could. She showed me that compassion is the greatest weapon, and that forgiveness weighs less than vengeance." Surprised, Asha tried to raise him, but he remained on his knees. "Don't kneel, Mal," she said softly. "We all fall one day." He just got up the right way. Malik smiled, and that smile was enough for the people to feel the depth of the moment. Afterward, Malik signaled to the men who had come with him. They brought baskets filled with provisions, fabrics, and tools. "This is not a gift," he explained. "It is what must be done because the justice of life is not punishing evil but rewarding good." Then he pointed to the building. "This shelter will be a home for those who have none, and it will bear the name of the one who inspired it." The women began to sing an old song, the kind sung at harvest time and during rebirth. The wind blew and the sound echoed through the forest. Malik lifted a wooden plaque engraved with the words, "Shelter from the rain." The name seemed to breathe. Asha looked at him and said tenderly, "You kept your promise." He replied, "No, I simply learned what a promise truly means." In the days that followed, the shelter became the heart of the village. Abandoned women found a home there. Orphans received food and care, and weary travelers were welcomed with fire and bread. And Asher, who had once lived in solitude, was now surrounded by people, laughter, and stories. The necklace Malik had left years before still hung at the entrance, a reminder of the day one life crossed paths with another beneath the weight of a storm. Malik returned to the shelter every month. He always arrived early, bringing supplies, helping with the harvests, and spending hours listening to Asher. He no longer spoke of hunting. He said he now hunted only for justice, not man's justice, but the kind found in the heart. One afternoon, as the sun set behind the trees, Asha looked at him and said, "The forest did its part. Malik, it wounded you to teach you. I only showed you the way?" He replied, "You showed me what life is." The village began calling Asha the mother of the rain, for they said that every time it rained, the drops first touched the shelter's roof, as if the sky remembered the night she took in the wounded man. Malik, in turn, became a protector of lands and people, never again a hunter of beasts, but guardian of what time had nearly taken from him dignity. And when someone in the years that followed asked Asha if she regretted risking her life for a stranger, she always replied with the same calm gaze, "Those who fall in the rain don't need questions, they need a hand." Their story spread from mouth to mouth, becoming legend, And to this day, when the wind stirs the trees and the rain begins to fall upon the village, the people still whisper. It was beneath the rain that a warrior's heart was reborn by the hands of a young woman. Time passed, and the rains returned with the same sound that had accompanied the beginning of that story. Water ran down the slopes, washing away the old paths, and the wind carried the scent of living earth, as if the world itself remembered everything that had come to pass. The village had grown around the shelter from the rain, and Usher's name had become a blessing whispered in every home, in every silent prayer. Malik and Usher never married. What bound them went beyond form, tradition, or desire. It was something deeper, a soul bond that asked for no name. Malik continued his journeys between villages, helping those in need, bringing seeds, tools, stories, and faith. And every time the road led him back to the shelter, Asha welcomed him with the same serene smile as if time had never passed. On quiet afternoons, he would sit beside her while children played in the courtyard. They talked about life, destiny, and the long roads life takes before teaching what truly matters. Malik would say the forest still called him from time to time, but that now he hunted differently, no longer prey, but injustice. And Asha, laughing, would reply that the forest always calls back those who learn to hear it. The respect between them was so deep that not even the most curious dared to ask if there was love, because love there revealed itself in gestures, not in words, in the shared glances, the mutual care, thessalence between them. And this kind of affection, so discreet yet profound, taught the village that true love does not need possession, only presence. But as the years passed, the shelter became more than a place. It became a symbol. There, orphans found family, wounded women rediscovered their strength, and lonely travelers learned that the path always offers helping hands. The people said Usher's spirit lived in every wall, in every lit fire, in every tear gently wiped away. Malik aged, his hair turned white, but the vigor of his soul remained the same. Once when a boy at the shelter asked why he kept coming back, Malik answered, "Because it was here that I learned what it means to be man." And he added, gazing into the horizon, "A warrior's courage isn't in the spear, it's in compassion." When Asha fell ill, already in her old age, Malik began to visit more often. He would sit by her bedside and hold her hand, just as she had done for him so many years ago. On one of those days, a gentle rain fell on the roof. Asha whispered, "Malik, you fulfilled everything you promised." He smiled and replied, "No, Asha, it was destiny that fulfilled what it wrote for us." After she passed, the entire village gathered at the shelter. Malik stood silently at the doorway with a wooden necklace still swayed in the wind, the same necklace he'd once left on the floor, now seeming to guard the spirit of all they had lived. The old hunter lifted his face to the sky and let the rain fall upon him. He wept without shame, without hurry. Asif, each drop was a memory, a thank you, a farewell. From that day on, Malik continued to visit the shelter, even alone. He brought supplies, told stories to the children, and on stormy nights he would sit by the fire, listening to the rain on the roof. To anyone who would listen, he said, "Those who fall in the rain don't need questions, just a hand." And so the people kept their story, passing it down from generation to generation. They told it in circles around the fire during harvests, and on nights when thunder echoed in the distance. And every time the rain fell upon the village, people looked to the sky and remembered that it was under that same rain that destiny united two souls, one seeking redemption, the other already knowing forgiveness. They say that even today, when the wind rustles through the valley trees, you can hear the distant echo of a woman's voice, soft and strong, saying, "It was under the rain that a warrior's heart was reborn in the hands of a girl." And no one doubts it, for there are stories that do not fade with time. They simply become faith, example, and eternity. If this story touched your heart, let us know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel. That really helps us keep bringing you real and emotional stories like this one. Thank you for being part of our